Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. This building behind me may look like an ordinary building, but on June 7, 2011, Josh Hilberling will fall from the 25th floor, falling 17 stories to his death. This would be the day that Josh, 19-year-old pregnant wife Amber Hilberling, would be labeled a murder. Some say it was cold-blooded murders, while others say it was a love relationship gone wrong, and then there are others that say that it was a relationship that was plagued with domestic violence and drug use. To make matters worse, on October 24, 2016, Amber Hilberling will be found dead in her jail cell. Join us when we go on location to the Jacob Lofts Apartments to interview Amber's mom, Rhonda Whitlock, who's going to tell her side of what she believes happened to Amber's life. If you want to know what the truth is, then join us because this is Up Close with Corey Taylor. Welcome back, and we are joined with Rhonda Whitlock, Amber Hilberling's mom, as well as Dr. Gina Pasalia. How are you all doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I know that it's rough for you right now because this is actually going to be, I don't want to say an anniversary, but it's almost 1 year.
It is. So 1 year post-traumatic.
Yes.
Or 7 year, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, the first year of her being, passed on. It's tough. It's bittersweet, but I still feel like it's the best thing to do is get the story out there.
Well, I want to commend you because you're really brave about continuing to talk about this narrative because most people don't really know the story.
Right.
And I know you've been on a ton of national as well as international type stuff trying to tell the story, but it seems like it always gets lost in translation, that there is always this media frenzy and this circus.
Unfortunately, I think documentaries and some light are done for ratings. And so the story can get lost and it can get so lost so easy.
One of the things I noticed was the media frenzy was crazy. It was like there was no way a fair trial could happen because there was so much skewed information, calling her a murderer and, the family's wealthy. And there were all kinds of twists and turns that I'm sure from your perspective just
this
really
was
clouded.
The modern day Tulsa witch trials. And eventually people are going to look back on this case, and I know I'm not going to stop until they do, and go, what can we do? What laws need to be changed? What can we do? What take can be taken? I mean, we've got to do something. It's not fair.
I wanted to say this. I know this is bizarre, but last night I listened and watched so many of the things related to you, and I was really grieved because it's just so abhorrent. But I thought of an old movie, a Monty Python movie, where King Arthur is approaching the hill, and there's the hill guard, and the hill guard's, you're not going by, and he's like, well, I'm going to have to fight you then. So he cuts off his arm, and then he's like, you have to give up. No, I'm not going to give up. Cuts off his other arm. It's just a little flesh wound. And I thought, that is Rhonda. She is guarding Amber's story.
Well,
and
I
she
think
is not going to give up.
As a mom, you're going to guard your kid's heart, no matter what it takes. And when it comes down to it, this is her soul. This is her heart. And until people know the truth, I'm not going to stop. And anyone that knows me, I'm not quiet. I think that people need to know what actually happened, not what was told by social media or by the news outlets. There's so many variables to this, and we'll get into that, but it's unfair.
And that's the reason why I brought you here, because I think that it's so important that the truth gets out. Because in researching the case of what actually happened, I could tell that there was not a lot of truth. And some of the things was, okay, he's 6'5", she's 5'6". I was watching the internet bloggers go crazy, and they said, okay, there's a little bit craziness going on with that equation. It talked about how, he's this military person and how they really, really made it like he had been in it. When I heard it, I was like, okay, he's been in for a long time, and actually that wasn't the truth. And so with this all happening, after you heard the media frenzy, what were the things going through your family's mind after knowing that, okay, it's going to be hard for her to get a fair trial?
At first, I think when you grow up and you believe in the law, you think that you're going to get a fair trial. Our first thoughts were, we're just going to wait till trial. We found out really quick, especially with Facebook, with Twitter, Instagram, right away that was going to be nearly impossible. Because what happened, and what most people don't know, is we weren't allowed to talk.
Wow.
So here it is. Here's an accident that happens. You watch on the news, which, by the way, is surreal. It's so surreal to watch your own family on the news when you don't get to say anything. And so, unfortunately, it went on for 2.5 years before trial.
Was that part of the judicial
That
system that said
that
you
was
weren't
part
allowed
of,
to verbalize
of an attorney saying, don't speak. Anything that you can, or anything you can say, or anything you don't say might be taken the wrong way. You're best just to not talk. So you try to believe in the system and you think, okay, I'm going to trust that this is what you do. And you step back and it's really hard. You know, like if your kid is like in middle school and they come home and they're like, so-and-so was calling me names. And a parent, your normal reaction is to go, no, we're taking care of this.
Wow.
Imagine when you know they're wrong and they're calling your kid a murderer. This is a kid that had never been in trouble with the law. Never been in trouble with the law. And all of a sudden, someone's saying murder?
That's the thing that got me, because when I remember sitting in Tulsa and I heard that whole thing and I was like, whoa, that is horrible. It wasn't until I met you. So that means that I was caught up in the media frenzy just like everyone else, because we want to believe that the media is telling us the truth a lot of time. But now that I started researching and finding, it's like so many things didn't add up. And so that was the reason why I wanted to bring you here, because I want to hear the truth. And I'm pretty sure there's a ton of people that want to hear the truth. I want to ask this question. So do you think that the judicial system failed your daughter?
1,000%. And I actually get chill bumps when you ask me that, because they failed big time. Not just a little bit, not just some, but big time. This is a case where it's so tragic, and I can sit down with anyone for just 5 minutes and tell them certain facts about this case that they've never heard, and it gives a whole new perspective to this trial. What if those jurors heard what I'm about to tell you?
Wow.
That
was it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the thing that fascinated me is because I work in domestic violence. I've worked in that for like 25 years. And it was so surreal is a good word, watching all of that, because, it's so ridiculous, common couple violence. Right. And, big pregnant woman, I've been pregnant 5 times, you're postured halfway back. There's no way you're going to shove anybody, because you're going to lose your balance. So the whole thing was just very awkward to me, and I've seen the judicial system not work, and so I just couldn't wait to get you on here and talk about some of this stuff.
Well, unfortunately in this case, I think that common sense goes out the window when people get caught up in a certain story. And it's happening today. I see it happen with our president or any of our people. I don't care who you're talking about. No one really knows, because they don't know these people. They don't know the actual facts, but because someone says it, then they start believing the story. Well, then that builds on this person telling this person, and this telling this person, and before long, there's nothing truthful about the story. They taught us this in grade school.
Yeah, I do it when I go out and do training. We call it a rumor drill, where you start off telling one person one thing, and if you have 5 people in line, by the end of the 5th person get it, it's totally different. I want to ask this question. It's almost been a year since she's been gone. The thing that I found that was really, really crazy is that I heard that she passed away, but as I started surveying people upon getting prepared for interviewing you, most people didn't even know that she had passed away. And I thought that was weird, because with the circus frenzy that was created by what she was allegedly supposed to do, she left this earth with very little fanfare. And I'm just wondering, what was that like when you got the call that she no longer was here?
The call was devastating. And when you say that she left without fanfare, I would beg to differ as the mom. because when you're directly involved in this case, there's thousands upon thousands of people that are supporting me. And that I have reached out to her, they've reached out to me, and they know the facts.
Okay.
I think that there's a few select few that honestly have their blinders on, and they only want to see what they want to see because they've already been told this. I still think this is an IQ issue, and I know that offends people, but you have to look outside the box. You can't just believe what you're seeing on your local news, your national news, your international news, because news is no longer about truth-telling. It's about storytelling.
Correct.
That's a huge difference between factual and what they want you to think to believe. I mean, like this made-up world
They want
over
to create
here.
a narrative that they need
Right.
you. When I said left without fanfare, I'm just saying at the scale of the media frenzy that was created,
100%.
why not equally be appalled that here it is, she's in jail, and here it is now, not long after that, she's
Well,
dead.
a simple fact, we know that Amber didn't commit suicide. We know she was murdered. We've had hundreds and hundreds of people back us up on this. Why isn't anyone investing a real
That's
murder?
my point. That's my point.
Like here
That
you
is my
have
point.
you have people testifying. No one testified at the trial that they saw Amber murder Josh, but yet she was convicted of murder. Yet you have a murder where there's hundreds of people saying she was murdered and no one's speaking because it doesn't fit into their narrative of the story.
And Rhonda, if I remember correctly, you guys were not allowed to do a private autopsy
We
on
were
her.
denied the
And
autopsy.
Isn't that your
That's
legal
weird.
right?
And
There's lots of things that are weird. The cameras are lost. The camera that supposedly could have captured what was going on happened to not be working, but they happened to call somebody 3 weeks prior to and say that they weren't working, but it never was fixed.
And I heard on some of the interviews you talking about how Amber was treated in prison and, how that impacted your family, knowing that basically on a huge scale was bullied horrifically.
To me, and people talk about this social bullying thing, and I think, here's a child that actually lived this. She was bullied into a trial that was wrongly accused, for one. And then she was grossly neglected by the public. And then you throw her away. People forget they're still having Thanksgiving dinner. They're still taking their kids to school. It's not affecting them personally. So it's just a story. And then all of a sudden, one day, an innocent child in all of this is visiting a gravesite. And no one cares to talk about any of this. No one cares to talk about what actually happened.
Wow. And here's the thing that got me was when I was doing the research of her actual initial trial with Josh being involved, the thing that got me was she was distraught.
Of course she was.
And they bring her down to the police department trying to say, well, we're trying to figure it all out. So here's a little room where you can go talk. And she's talking to your mother, her grandmother.
Which already knows the story.
Exactly.
Right.
And then somebody conveniently flips on the recorder, but that's admitted into court to bring about the conviction.
Right. And any good psychologist will tell you that Amber went through a very traumatic event. She was the first one on the scene. She actually tried to put Josh back together. She actually tried to catch his foot. She had cut marks that proved that. Not cut marks from what people were saying that she pushed him out the window. She actually had actual cut marks on her wrist from trying to grab him. One shoe was in, one was out. I mean, everything that Amber said was provable.
Well,
It wasn't told.
when I listen to that, I've worked with critical incident debriefing. I actually go out and provide services for corporations and stuff. And when there is a traumatic event, it is totally normal for somebody to blame themselves.
Oh,
You've got to find some point of control. Right. And I only found her do that minimally. I mean, she's talking about trying to put him back together, kissing his cheeks,
But imagine seeing that. Like, you have the child, you're 7 months pregnant. You have this baby inside you, and all of a sudden this horrible accident, and Amber used to say it was a split second. I mean, it's a split second that all this happens. And then you're the first one down, and the picture in my head still to this day of my little girl is her on her knees with her hands up in the air going, oh my God, he fell. And it pains me when I watch the video of her talking. I know those are emotional utterances, but you know, my mom asked a very direct question.
Very direct.
Said, did you mean to do this? And Amber's response is, of
Absolutely
course
no.
not.
Yes.
Of course not. He fell. I pushed him. She did push him. She did. You know, people
She
there
pushed
say,
him
"Oh my
to
gosh,
protect herself.
she
It
pushed
was
him."
self-defense.
But he pushed her first. She's 7 months pregnant, mama bear. I mean, you have a 6'5" guy and you're 5'7" pregnant. She pushed him.
Well, in domestic violence,
The only
it's
murder
really
in
high
all of
during
this
pregnancy.
is apartment complex with having illegal windows. That's what people need to know. These are illegal windows. We had the best glass guy come down from Chicago, and he said everything was wrong that day. The winds were wrong. That building is circular. The winds that day were 25 miles an hour, which creates a shear effect around the building, which actually is a vacuum effect. The caulking around that building was so old, and they have pictures of that. This is proven stuff. Was so old that and then the size of the window itself was at knee level for Josh. Josh was very tall. And so everything that happened when he fell back into that window, he couldn't have stopped himself no matter what, because the vacuum effect that day sucked him out of the window.
Man.
So was all of that admissible evidence that was allowed?
You know, some of it was, some of it wasn't. But they never talked, you know, there were things that were allowed that were fake, but then the actual proof of what we had was not allowed. Pretty much on our part, nothing was allowed.
Wow. So let me do this. Just for people that don't know the story, and it would be kind of weird if people didn't know the story. From Amber's point of view, take us back to the very day.
So we'll actually take you back. I'll take you back to June 7th, 2011. First of all, that wasn't Amber and Josh's apartment. That's the first thing people got wrong. These weren't spoiled kids the way they made it out in the news that live in this iconic Tulsa high-rise. That was her mommy and daddy's apartment that was actually used for patient overflow for out-of-town guests. So the kids had a house when Josh got kicked out of the military for drugs. The kids actually had a house that was supposed to be done on June 1st. It wasn't going to be done until June 15th. So the kids called. They were staying with me. Josh got caught using drugs at my house. We have 6 other children. I have a strict policy in my house. Anyone that knows me, if you do drugs, you're not living with me. I have 6 kids to raise. You're not doing that. Josh was not allowed to stay. Now, they're married at this point. You don't control their adult actions, but you can control what goes on in your household. They were to not be there. And then they had this fake protective order because when he got kicked out of the military, he came back and they were at our house when the sheriff showed up to serve his wife a protective order that his parents forced him to do. They were laughing about this. We have video cameras in our house that showed them laughing about this.
Wow.
That was never ever said in the courtroom. So the kids, nonetheless, they have to leave my house. And yes, spoiled. I should have kicked them out on the streets, to be honest. They would have been safer, not in that building.
But not spoiled just Amber.
No, I'm saying, and her husband.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Of course they were spoiled.
Now, I want to say this because one thing that I'm hearing you say that I think got totally lost in translation, you talked about the fact, and we actually have documents that shows that he got discharged honorably from the military, but it was due to drug abuse.
Yes.
But
and manufacturing.
Right. But that's never talked about.
No, it's no one knows that. And I have the actual
Yeah, we actually have it. But what is your theory on why none of that was ever? I know you talked about the narrative, but
it
why?
didn't go with the story that the media painted. When you have a narrative that you're going to paint, you only add in stuff that you think is pertinent to the story. That wasn't pertinent to their story. It wasn't this good-looking 6'5" military guy and this beautiful young, 5'7" princess bride. That didn't go with the story.
That was 19, by the way.
19.
Yes,
Young,
still not even
a baby.
an adult.
I mean,
I remember having a kid at
one
19.
that Mama wasn't too happy when someone comes home and say, "Hey, we're moving to Alaska and we're going to get married, plan the wedding."
Now I'm glad you said that because what we find is that even in Alaska, there was domestic violence that happened. So I want to go back to this whole drug thing because the thing that most people don't know is that oftentimes when there is some type of domestic violence, and there was domestic violence in this relationship, there was also drug use as well as drug abuse, and as you have just brought into the narrative manufacturing. How long was that actually going on that you all knew about the relationship?
We did not know that Josh was manufacturing drugs until we flew Amber home. They had a fight up in Alaska, and Amber had breast implants, and she allowed me to say this. This is not something she didn't get blessed into the world of, being a woman, and she got that, and one of her implants she thought was ruptured by Josh. And the police up there actually, with the police report, he had tried to break one of her breast implants.
Wow.
So we actually flew Amber home at this point, and she did not know she was pregnant yet. But it was a bad enough fight to where, you start talking as parents, especially my husband, hey, what are you guys doing? Something's not right here. This is not a good, healthy marriage. Of course, they're young, and they both come from broken homes. And when I say that, they both at some point had been around domestic violence. So to them, this was kind of normal. I mean, I think that they thought this was kind of a normal relationship.
Well, and the chaotic patterns of, you can have an intense, passionate love. You look at their letters and everything.
Yeah, the love letters are amazing.
Passionate, but it was a typical chaotic bond that they had, which is the common couple violence. It's very prevalent. It's like the elephant in the room in a gazillion households in this country that no one really wants to talk about.
It's funny. They say it's the elephant in the room, but yet every movie, every love story portrays violence. Every movie at some point will see a push and shove match. The woman is so frustrated in the man, and she's like, oh, or oh my gosh.
But it's the elephant in the room of people
Who
wanting
don't want
to
talk acknowledge it for real life.
And I do believe that probably played a role in
huge.
the social media not wanting to focus on the fact that it was typical common couple violence, rather having to make someone into a murderer.
Right. But then they would have to deal with their own relationship,
Exactly.
and people don't want to have to admit that, hey, we've done that stuff before.
Yes. I think this is all good to understand, but I guess what I'm hearing, and I need to say this, is because when I hear that there were drugs in the relationship, that should have, if that would have been allowed to be entered into as evidence, that would have shown background of altered reality, altered state of mind. Now, I want to ask this question. So was there anything else? Because you just alluded to that they both had come from a broken home. I want to say thank you for saying that, because you're talking about you're her mom, and then Josh has his family issues as well. And so you talked about that this seems to be what was the norm for them, a commonplace. But take me to, what do you think was going through Amber's mind once you all realized that, her implant was possibly ruptured by Josh, and now you all
and it was
find
back
out
and
there's
forth.
drugs involved.
Right. And so Amber came home, and I was like, as a mom, you just cut to the chase. And I remember still her taking a bath and seeing like this massive bruise. And I was like, honey, this is not okay. And I'll never forget her saying, Dad did it to you.
Oh, wow.
That was, still to this day, that's so hard to swallow. Because you want to talk about guilt when, you had that tape. When Josh died, if they would have taped me, I would have been the one that they were saying was a murderer. Because my first thing is, I did this to them. If I would have left their dad, then she would have left Josh, and he wouldn't be dead.
And let me bring some clarity. Let me bring some clarity, because that's not your current husband.
No.
I just want to make sure.
No. I've been remarried for years.
But I just wanted to make sure that we pick up.
But I'm saying when the kid's dad, all of my kids' father, like it was an abusive situation, and he will admit that too. An alcoholic home. And he couldn't see that in him. But Amber, so for the first few years of Amber's life, young, she watched some of this stuff,
Well,
and she
and-
watched a mom go back.
Well, and that's the intergenerational impact of domestic violence, and kids do pick up those nuances, and that does become normal. And that's really what needed to be addressed,
Right.
is their backgrounds, where they came from, and they just didn't get the help they needed.
Well, and then you have Josh went through a very traumatic upbringing. Matter of fact, when they were married, it was the first time his stepmom and his stepmom and his father had actually been to one of their kids' weddings. It was a very dysfunctional household. We actually got to meet Josh's real mom after the accident, and she always supported us and supported Amber. And she said it was devastating to watch what went on in their lives, because there was abuse on her end. And, she died with that. She died knowing that she felt like she passed that on to Josh. One of the last things she said to me before she passed on was like, I feel like if I would have left their father early on, then maybe he wouldn't have created that pattern. So you again have parent guilt
And
from
it's
something we couldn't even control.
Right, and it's a twofold story, because there's the what ifs, what could have been, but
Right.
there's, what I hear you say is then there's the ultimate improper judicial system
Right.
that then created
And
double
that's
tragedy.
what it comes down to, because I look back on this and I don't think that Josh is a bad guy. And I know when people say, well, yeah, but he made poor decisions. He had drugs. He was an addict. He needed help. I don't think he was a bad guy. His actions were bad.
I want to ask this last question, and before I go, what would you want the one thing, if you could, for people to remember about Amber?
Get both sides of the story. And not just what you hear in the news, but do your own research before you convict an innocent child. Amber died, to me, when I say that there's a murder, yes, the windows, if that wouldn't have happened, none of this would have happened. But even if it wasn't that, she wouldn't have been convicted if the world wouldn't have convicted her before they knew the truth.
Well, Rhonda, I would like to thank you for coming. Dr. Gina, I would like to thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed our show today. I would like to thank our guests, Dr. Gina Bazzalia, as well as Rhonda Whitlock, for joining us. Think about this. Change is inevitable, but your attitude towards that change, it is always optional. Until next time, keep looking forward.
This show is brought to you in part by
Dear Jennifer, Sante Center for Healing helped me regain control of my life. I have so much to live for. My family, my friends, myself. You are worth the effort. Sante Center for Healing. Hope begins here.